Hello everyone and welcome back to another instalment of the Warwick F1 Show. The 2024 season is finally over and the World of F1 have actually had their awards, so we thought we would do the exact same and we're going to present, of course, the more important Warwick F1 Show awards. I'm your host Callum and I'm once again joined by Katch and Will Kingswood. Thank you very much both for joining me. So essentially what we've done is we've picked 8 categories to discuss. We've each got answers for them to kind of do a bit of a season review now that we've had all the races over. And we're going to be discussing those. And any eagle-eyed viewers who are also part of the Warwick F1 Society would have seen these categories appearing on our Instagram stories. So we're going to compare with those, see what the society also thought, see if we were along similar lines or if they completely disagree, which we shall see about. The first category, quite predictably, is Best Driver. Will Kingswood, I'll come to you first. Best Driver, is this an obvious one?
I think it kind of has to be. Obviously, you have your top, I think, the top 3 in the championship, all Norris, Verstappen and Leclerc, and then you've got a few drivers further down the standings that I'm sure we'll come on to mention. But I don't think you can look past Max Verstappen. I think regardless of kind of how good that car is, it did come third in the Constructors' Championship. It's the first time since, I think, 1982 or 84, I want to say, that a car outside the top 2 in the Constructors has had a driver win the Drivers' Championship. And just race after race, you did see Verstappen taking consistent wins, but also where he wasn't able to win, coming second or third and keeping the pressure up on the chasing pack behind him. I think it wasn't as perfect as last year, and I think you're never going to see anything quite as perfect as Verstappen's 2023 year again. But this 2024, when he was in a car that was clearly not the fastest on the grid for a large portion of the season, he was still able to perform. He was still able to get those points, and ultimately he was able to secure that 4th championship.
Yeah, as you mentioned, with the car not being as good or the performances not being as good as 2023, I think that is purely down to how bad the car has been for Red Bull compared to previous years. And I think this is truly just a testament to how good Verstappen's driving has been. Obviously, we've had complaints about him for a few races with maybe his ultra aggressive driving style, but you can't deny he's, I think, one of the best drivers in the world currently. And just the fact that we were able to see him, it was almost an example this year of how good of a driver he is, because he was able to get the max amount of that car in every single race, and ultimately that was the difference, I think, between him and Norris when it came to and him and anyone else really when it came to the Drivers' Championship, is Verstappen was able to really get the most out of that car. And that's ultimately why he's walked away with the Drivers' Championship, because he remains to be one of the best drivers on the grid, and no one has been able to really challenge him yet. Katch, do you agree, or have you gone for someone different?
I do agree. You can't, like we've said already, you can't look past all the consistency that Max has had. Sure, I think his driving style, especially after winning that title, has taken a back foot again. And there has to be complaints and arguments about, does that make him maybe the best driver and take away from his driving ability? But no, you can't. He won so many races at the start of the season. He had that gap in the championship. And then he just maintained it even after going, I think it was nearly 10 races without winning. The fact he was able to win that title, despite the chaos that ensued behind, he was the best. We do have the honourable mentions, obviously, of Norris getting his maiden win and getting 4 wins in the season, Leclerc winning Monaco and Monza, and those were such important wins for him and Ferrari, and the consistency that a lot of the other drivers had behind, including Russell, I want to say, is like an honourable mention of being fairly consistent throughout the season. But yeah, no, Verstappen, like, by far and away was the best driver of 2024.
It is very easy to forget, and I do keep forgetting that we did have that period at the start of the season where it did seem like another 2023 was coming, until we got, I think it was Miami, where Norris got his maiden victory, and McLaren did kind of with the upgrades they brought to that race, did kind of become the fastest car on the grid, exceeding past Red Bull. But certainly Verstappen was still on it. You mentioned there the honourable mentions. Lando Norris, obviously. I did wonder, Katch, if you were going to go for Lando Norris or whether you would go for Verstappen. I was not sure which side of the fence you would come down with on that.
No, but when we're doing actual awards, you've got to be... You can't have your biases completely take over. And the thing is, Norris's performance just weren't consistent enough. He will be the first to admit that. He was sure his qualifying was incredible. By far, in my opinion, the best qualifier of 2024. I know that's not a category, but easily there is no debate in my opinion. But for best overall driver, he wasn't consistent enough. He didn't convert those poles to wins more than enough. He didn't take away from Max's points, especially the latter part of the season. So you can't argue that he was better than Verstappen.
Yeah, I think that for me, Norris had races where he was on Verstappen's level in terms of being able to just kind of dominate the race. You look to the Netherlands where he did lose that lead at the start, but was able to gain it back and win in one of the most dominant races of the season, and definitely outside of kind of that first few race period. Then you had like Singapore, you had Abu Dhabi at the end of the season, but the problem was they were quite few and far between. And when you look at what Norris kind of had the opportunity to do, especially with how many times he was starting on pole and ultimately how many times he did lose that pole off the race start, I think it's fair to say this season was probably an opportunity missed for Lando Norris. But I think definitely one of the best drivers this season, because when he was able to perform and when he was on it, you could see the potential that was there and the potential that he'll probably take with him into the next few seasons. Now he knows what it's like to win and lead races and kind of dominate. I think this will be a really good kind of building opportunity. But for this season, it probably wasn't the one that he wanted.
I think the word that we've used before is inconsistency. That is Lando Norris's season. We've talked a lot about this, where even though, yes, there were times he did make those mistakes, there were also times where he will be very happy with his performances, and he's made huge leaps and bounds compared to where he's been in previous seasons, and certainly just displayed his potential. That was a really good way to put it, Will. His potential for next season, if the McLaren car does continue to be as good as it was this season. So looking at some other honourable mentions that we gave out to our society, Leclerc being one of them. Obviously, I think coming into his own in the last stages of the season when the Ferrari car really caught up to the McLaren in terms of pace on that penultimate triple header in the Americas. And also Hülkenberg, who I think should definitely be as a shout, because he's been extremely consistent for Haas, and certainly one of the main reasons why Haas have made huge strides this season compared to their previous couple of seasons. Definitely Hülkenberg being as consistent as he has been and getting the most out of that Haas car. The society did actually agree with us as well. They got over half of the votes did get Verstappen, which I think we could have all maybe predicted coming, even though it is, I guess, slightly boring as he's been the best driver contender for the past few seasons. Ultimately, he is the best driver, I think, still currently there. Lando Norris came second with 20%. Leclerc very close behind in third with 16%, and then Hülkenberg got 9% of the votes as well. So I think
a lot of those votes would probably just be people. I will admit I did not vote for Verstappen in that poll, but that's because I knew he would get a landslide win, and I didn't want it to be as landslide. So
yeah, but then it's if he gets a landslide victory, then that just shows that he has been the best driver, I think.
Yeah, and a 55% win is incredible. Like it's very much deserved.
Yeah. I'm sure he'll be as happy with that 55% win as he is with his drivers' championship. But equal awards given there. We'll move it on to our next category, which is the best race. Katch, I'll let you go first on this one. What was your favourite race from the 2024 season?
Okay, so I have favourite races, but that's obviously most of them are Lando Norris's wins. But objectively, they weren't the best races in themselves. The best and most entertaining race for me, I will say, was Britain with Silverstone. I loved watching it. Of course, there was the incredible result at the end, with Lewis Hamilton getting his victory at Silverstone, as he should. But it was also quite a lot of drama throughout, and especially in that latter part of the race. you just didn't know whether he would get it. Obviously, I think other people are going to mention Brazil. It was good. It was just I didn't enjoy it as much. I don't know. Maybe I'm an Alpine hater, but I didn't enjoy it as much. But no, for me, it was Silverstone. I think I will look back. There were so many good races. It's really hard to pinpoint one, in my opinion, and I think we'll all agree. But yeah, for me, it was Silverstone.
Well, this is very boring because I think I'm going to go Silverstone, and I know for certain that Will Kingswood is going to go for Silverstone as well. Yeah, go on, Will. It's got to be Silverstone, right?
Right, so I will go for Silverstone, and it's slightly more biased. Obviously, being a Hamilton fan, watching that, and especially because it was kind of still in that period where you always felt Verstappen could still win a race, and watching him kind of close up little by little, it was a lot like, oh, it's going to happen again. He's going to lose the race, and being able to hold on was definitely, and kind of break that streak or win the streak that he had for the past kind of 2.5 years at that point was definitely really entertaining. And I think just generally the race was an entertaining one. We obviously had the little rain shower in halfway through the race, and we saw some drivers such as Charles Leclerc make the mistake of going on to intermediate tyres. So there was kind of that pressure. And at one point you did have this kind of 3 British drivers running at the front. Obviously Russell did end up retiring, but you had Russell, you had Hamilton, you had Norris, all running 1, 2, 3. And I think for a British crowd, it was definitely the result that they wanted. And I think just in general, the race was one that was kind of incredibly engaging and interesting, and would be the one I'd go for. Outside of that, I think Brazil, it's hard to look past in terms of obviously seeing Verstappen go from 17th to 1st. But I think for a lot of races this season, you saw quite similar kind of how the storylines and how they panned out, and they ended up being kind of close battles for the win right at the end of the race, which is something we've not seen in a long time. And I think the other 2 nominations we had for Canada and Baku echo that you had close battles for the win where you didn't really know who was going to come out on top until right at the end of the race. And I think it just shows that maybe even if we didn't have the title battle that we wanted this season, individual races, there were at least like 6 or 7, maybe even up to 10 that you could say were genuinely really, really good races.
Yeah, certainly. With those other nominations, like you mentioned, we did also put on Baku in Canada. Baku being a win for Piastri. I guess you could say his first actual victory. Even though he did win in Hungary, that was obviously handed back to him after kind of a bit of a mess up in pit stops from McLaren. But and a brilliant race from him to be able to hold off the drivers behind him. I think it was Carlos Sainz and Sergio Perez, certainly one of the 2 Ferraris. And then Canada, also a rain-soaked race. I think personally for me, as I've mentioned, I'm going to go for Silverstone. I think I am quite biased in this because I was lucky enough to watch it live. And after having to persist through like a completely rain-soaked Saturday, it was nice to see Hamilton get back onto the podium or get his win. And you could also see how much it meant to him after the race. And I think that's because it almost reminded me a little bit of when Pierre Gasly got his win for AlphaTauri and Monza, where it was kind of the end of the redemption arc, where Pierre Gasly had obviously been downtrodden from his period at Red Bull, and he was able to find his route again in F1. And I think for Hamilton, it's exactly the same, where he's had those few seasons with Mercedes where they've not been the best car, and he really has been losing his form and his way a little bit. But then I think Silverstone was the time where he was able to cement that again as still being one of the best drivers on the grid ultimately. And that's why ultimately it meant so much to him, I think, in the end, to be able to win in front of the home crowd. And it meant so much for the crowds as well. Brazil, I think, for me personally, I would actually put objectively as a more entertaining race, as more things happened. That's just personally for me. But with it being the rain-soaked race and so many other events happening lap after lap. But I think just the end result for me does it for Silverstone. But certainly any of those 4 races that we had nominations for, It was from our society just Silverstone. It was a very close one. Silverstone at 47% of the votes and Brazil at 36% of the votes. And then Baku coming in at a very close third in 9% and Canada at 8%. So, but yeah, some very good races there. But I think we had two clear dominant winners there with Silverstone and Brazil. We'll move it on to our next category where we have the worst race. So I think luckily we've not had too many candidates for this. We have been privileged with a very good season this year, but we had to have a few race candidates for the worst race, and I've personally gone for Monaco purely by the way I deduce this is that I just thought, right, what race can I remember the least? And I think many other people have done that. Will Kingswood, I'll come to you. I've gone with Monaco. What has been your worst race?
See, this is interesting because we have just had a discussion about, I guess, the narrative, like playing a part in making Silverstone the best race of the season. And I almost have to say the narrative plays its part in making Monaco not the worst race of the season. I think objectively, it was an awful Monaco Grand Prix, made even worse by the fact that because you can pit under red flags, and we had one right at the start, everyone was able to get their pit stop in and just run the entire race on one set of tyres. You did end up seeing the top 10 finish as they started, but you did also see a Charles Leclerc win, and I think that can't be overlooked in terms of obviously what it meant to Leclerc, what it meant to, I guess, Monaco as a whole, especially after kind of the years of bad luck that he's had at the track. So I'm not going to go for Monaco, but I am going to go for Saudi Arabia, because while I was preparing, kind of thinking about for this episode, I could not for the life of me remember a single lap of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. I have since been reminded that this was Ollie Behrman's first race. Still, I did
remind you of that, but then to be fair, when you asked me, is there anything else you can remember? I said no. So it certainly was. Apart from that, and it was a nice opportunity to see Ollie Behrman get his shot in F1. Apart from that, yeah, I can't really think of much else that happened.
Yeah, I think to be honest, you could take any one of the first 5 races wouldn't be an unreasonable shout, and I think that just go back to at that time it was very much looking like a continuation of 2023 in terms of Verstappen dominating, and I think we were all kind of a bit wary of where the season would be going. But I wouldn't say that after kind of Imola we had many or any races that were truly bad. But no, for me, I will go Saudi Arabia just to be a bit different. And obviously I think Monaco wasn't good, but it did come with that Charles Leclerc win.
Yeah, I think I am kind of contradicting myself a little bit here, because I realized that for the best race I did center a bit on the result in the end. But I think I am kind of overlooking the fact, because obviously I was very happy to see Charles Leclerc get his home win. I think that was incredible to see from him. In a way, he chose the best 2 races to win, the home race for him and then the home race for Ferrari. But Monaco, I think, was still a disappointment for me. Again, apart from that home win for Charles Leclerc, nothing happened. When I was researching this episode, I was thinking, I saw Monaco as one of the categories, and I did think, what happened? And then I saw that the qualifying order and the race order was exactly the same, which for me cemented it as being right. Yes, I'm going with that for my worst race of the season. I can't really remember anything that happened apart from I was reminded with the crash between the Hasses and Sergio Perez at the very start. But then apart from that, it was just standard Monaco driving in circles. Katch, what was your take on the worst race of the season? Are you going Saudi Arabia, Monaco, or something else?
So I was about to say I enjoyed Monaco. I didn't enjoy Monaco, but I enjoyed.
No one enjoys Monaco.
I enjoy us going to Monaco. I don't want to ever off the grid, off the circus. There we are. No, it was a bit boring, sure, but Charles Leclerc got his win, and it's a classic. And the crash at the beginning was very fun, so I enjoyed it. Sure, It's not my worst. Bahrain's my worst. What happened in Bahrain? Did we even go to Bahrain at this point? I've genuinely just looked at the race report, and the race report was a load of nothing. Nothing happened in that race. It was stupid. I think we just need to not go to Bahrain again. So that's my worst race.
Nah, I'm removing Monaco off the calendar before I'm removing Bahrain. What?
There's no way. Okay, I'll keep Bahrain on the calendar purely because they invest in McLaren, and I love that for them. But
Monaco just has yachts and nothing else.
Yeah, but it's a classic historic. Come on.
Who cares? There's nothing happens there.
You need to respect
to the point of just
more.
under 2 hours of my life wasted for Monaco.
No, but qualifying.
Quali, yeah, exactly.
Quali is so good.
That's because the race is terrible. People say, it's the best qualifying of the season. Yes, that's just another way of saying the race is awful.
Monaco was like top 6, top 7 last year because it rained. I think the whole point of Monaco is that it has potential. It doesn't reach that potential most of the time, but when it does, it's elite.
It is, and it's just so historic, and it's a classic. And I love going back and watching like the 80s like races in Monaco because
1996 Monaco, where like 4 cars finished.
We're talking about the present day. This is 2024 season. No. Okay, so it's still a long time ago. No, I think the better thing to do, I would say, is reduce the size of the cars so we can race at Monaco. Because
that's what they're doing.
That's what I want to see happen. Because if we could actually race at Monaco, sure, I would love to see Monaco on the grid because it, as you say, it has some great potential. But yeah, I think Monaco was a good shout. Bahrain, I also can't remember much that happened. Nothing happened. It was literally nothing happened. Max got first and Sergio got second. That's it. I do feel I didn't go with Bahrain just because I felt that there was a bit of bias in the fact that it was the first race of the season, so I might have not remembered anything from that. But now I'm realising that I didn't remember anything just because there was nothing to remember.
I think, there is that point, obviously, that the earlier races people aren't going to remember, especially because there isn't much on the line. But then you've got to think next season we're going to Australia first, and I think we will remember stuff. You've got to have a good track at the beginning, and just having Bahrain at the beginning is just a nothing burger. It's stupid. So
I think the races being earlier doesn't help, but also the earlier races were just objectively, I think, less entertaining than what we ended up seeing, especially throughout the middle, but also kind of the later part of the season as well.
I think it would be nice to return to Albert Park next season for Australia. I think I prefer Australia as a starting race. But anyway, I digress. In terms of seeing the society results, they also agreed that Monaco was the worst race. That was 45% of the results, and Bahrain behind in 26%. The other 2 races, I realised that, well, you made the categories and you didn't even put Saudi Arabia on one of the categories.
Yeah, well, I forgot about Saudi Arabia, which I feel like proves my point.
Okay.
I think Singapore and Japan and Japan falls in it was early in the season and Verstappen was still kind of dominating category, and Singapore was, just Norris doing a good job.
See, I disagree with your nominations for both of those, actually. Okay. So Singapore, I'm obviously going to disagree with. It was a Lando Norris win. It was incredible. Sure, it was slightly... Yeah, that's great. I don't think... So for me this season, I'm going to even make this point about a Piastri win or a Russell win. If it's a non-Verstappen win, I'm not going to say it's really that boring of a race, purely because we're so used to, in previous seasons, Verstappen dominance, that even if it's another non-Verstappen driver being dominant, in the same way that we said about Silverstone, it's exciting. It's like, is he going to hold on? Is Max suddenly going to come into his own? I think having, Singapore and maybe Netherlands were very dominant performances from Lando Norris, but it was exciting because it's not Max Verstappen. No.
You can't say You can't say that. It's I can't say that because I'll always stick by the fact that the reason that last season was boring, and also the reason why I also found F1 a little bit more boring in kind of 2019 to 2020 as well, is because Mercedes, there was one car that's so dominant, and I think it was a bit better back then in 2018, 2019, because you also did have the Ferraris up there a little bit as well, and Red Bull on occasions, but certainly 2023 was absolutely boring, and that's nothing to do with what driver it is. It's just we want a battle for the lead, and so I can't say I would personally agree with you there. Singapore, isn't that the one where we got the safety car after ages? Or was that a different race?
No, that was the one where we didn't get the
Yeah, we didn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay, right.
That was like really proving the safety car curse. We didn't
Yeah,
get
because
one in
we'd
Singapore.
always had a safety car in Singapore and we didn't get one. Okay, right, fair enough. Yeah, that was maybe because maybe that's why it should be on there, and because everyone was anticipating it and we had our hopes crushed by not getting a safety car.
I think it was Texas we saw the first one since Canada, because there's some driver, don't know who, had binned it in the gravel after 2 laps. No idea who that guy was.
Not going to mention who that is. So Monaco was first, Bahrain second, Japan just ahead of Singapore. Japan with 15% of the votes and Singapore with 14% of the votes. Certainly, I think the earlier stages of the season were slightly more boring because, again, like we mentioned, we had that period of Verstappen dominance. On to our next category, we're going to go with the biggest surprise driver. So essentially, the drivers that surprised us the most, maybe ones that we thought weren't going to do as well and actually completely exceeded expectations going into the 2024 season, possibly compared to previously. Will, what have you gone for this category here as the biggest surprise driver?
So I think there's a few here that I think you could reasonably say, but for me, it would have to be Colapinto because, where I was always a little bit of a Logan Sargent defender in terms of I don't think that he was necessarily as bad as many people were saying. I don't think he was great, but I don't think it kind of warranted that much of kind of hate. So when they decided to replace him, I was a bit disappointed, but fair enough. And I don't think anyone really thought that Colapinto was going to be the right driver in terms of being able to perform, and it really kind of felt like Williams just shoring up, getting through the season. I think by then they'd signed Carlos Sainz, and he would be coming in. Obviously, they'd be looking forward to next season. But then Colapinto comes in and is genuinely probably on Alex. He's not maybe on Alex Albon's level, but he's a lot closer than I think a lot of people were expecting.
I thought for the first couple of races he was actually exceeding Alex Albon in terms of his pace.
Yeah, I think recently it's kind of regressed back to what some people were expecting in terms of being a rookie, being a bit crash happy, being a bit slower. But you look towards you look to some of the kind of overtakes, some of the races that Colapinto's had, and for a driver who I think it's fair to say no one really had any expectations of when he was coming in, kind of in the final legs of Europe, he far and away exceeded what people were seeing. And I think you see that in kind of speculation about where he's going to end up driving in the future, because he was linked with Red Bull at one point. And I think if you'd gone back to Monza and said, oh, this new driver in 8 races time is going to be linked with the seat next to Max Verstappen, that is by far and away clearing anyone's expectations of kind of what they thought Colapinto was going to be able to do.
Yeah, certainly I think when I agree with you there that my choice was Colapinto for the biggest surprise driver. I think when Williams did announce that they were going to get rid of Logan Sargent, it's not that I was saying he shouldn't have been ditched by Williams, because I do think he was. I think he was given plenty of time to show some signs of performances, and he wasn't really. But my mindset was they may as well go for it because they're not going to improve that much, or they're not really risking anything because Sargent's not really getting any points. And my thought bringing in Colapinto was, is he really going to be able to do more in that Williams seat compared to Sargent? Because I think we were under the impression that Alex Albon was always doing incredibly well and getting the most out of that car, and then having almost a bit like Red Bull, having a bit of a second seat issue that they've had for the past couple of seasons, obviously before having Nicholas Latifi. But Colapinto came in and exceeded all expectations, and just the fact, I thought at best he could maybe get close to Albon's pace. But then for the first couple of races, I thought he actually exceeded Albon's pace. And I think it is a bit unfair, I think, in hindsight to look at it that way, because I do think Albon hit a little bit of bad form coming the end of the season. He's certainly been better in that Williams compared to how he was in the latter stages of the 2024 season. But Colapinto, I think, did it extremely well. And even though at the moment, speaking, he's not got a seat for 2025 or for any future F1 seasons, I would bet good money that he will be back soon in F1, because I think Williams said that they are going to keep a close eye on him and going to keep him close, even though Sainz is having that second driver seat for the 2025 season. But I do think Colapinto certainly deserves to have a seat in F1 because he showed what he is capable of. And yeah, he, as I mentioned, just exceeded all expectations. Katch, what did you go for with your biggest surprise driver?
So I haven't gone for Colapinto. I obviously respect all the points you've said, and I do agree he was really good coming in, and he shocked us all in the first few races. But the latter part of form, it just wasn't acceptable. And sure, Alex had those moments as well, but just overall from the team and from Colapinto, it was not good enough, in my opinion.
And his huge bill for Williams with the amount of car pieces that he crashed.
Okay,
so that as well.
I'm not going to trust the damage table, the Destructors standings, because there has been
the World Destructors Championship.
World Destructors Championship, because it is proven that is actually completely inaccurate. Pierre Gasly did cause damage. He didn't actually go the whole season, and no one has ever fact checked that. So, F1, I'm coming for you. But it's actually funny. Alex and Colapinto both caused more millions of dollars of damage than Logan Sargent did overall in the end. So
no, this is not Will. This is not a reason that we pick up Logan Sargent. No, we
I
have
don't
to
think we need to bring him back.
No,
Logan would have caused that damage as well.
Damaging.
No.
Maybe to the price bill of Williams, but not to their performance or their points tally. I think he was more destructive in that sense.
100%. My God, we're not even doing an argument to bring Logan Sargent back. No way.
We should just do a whole episode on that. Coming your way in the off season, should we bring back Logan Sargent? 2-hour episode debate on the Warwick F1
Debate
show.
episode? It's gonna be 10 minutes.
Yeah, if we just don't invite on Will for that episode, then it'll be pretty quick. Who have you gone for?
I haven't gone Colapinto. I have gone Nico Hülkenberg because I think he, especially in the second half of the season, his consistency was great. Ignoring the Alpine jump, he was the reason that Haas jumped up so high and stayed so high. In the final 7 races, he finished in the top 10 5 times, and it wasn't just 10th place. None of those were 10th places. They were all 9th and 8th places. And he just consistently was there. It wasn't a shock to see him in Q3. And to see where Haas were a year ago, 3 years ago, it's great to see that he has been such a cornerstone. Honestly, Nico Hülkenberg has been incredible this season, throughout the whole season, in my opinion. With his qualifying, like I mentioned, his race performances, he's quite a clean racer. He's got good, consistency. It's fun to see him battle. So I think, for me, I hate the word surprise because how are we defining that? But
this is the thing.
That's the interest, because obviously Colapinto has been the biggest surprise driver because he wasn't a driver for 2/3 of the season. So no, well done. But I don't know. I think for the best, maybe we define surprise as a driver that doesn't usually get their flowers. This is the thing. This is why I would, even though I completely agree with you in terms of how good Hülkenberg has been this season, this is the only reason why I think I chose Colapinto over Hülkenberg as the biggest surprise driver, because I think with Hülkenberg, even though he was doing very well, you expected him not to do as well as he did, but you expected him to be decent in that Haas car with the amount of experience that he has in F1. But Colapinto, I think no one expected anything, especially in the Williams seat. And how poor the other drivers who have been in that Williams seat have performed in previously with the likes of Latifi and Logan Sargent, as we've already mentioned. I think that was a bigger surprise to me. But I do completely agree with you, Katch, that Hülkenberg has been immense this season, and I think it will be really interesting to see what he gets up to at Sauber next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably completely agree with Callum. Colapinto came out of nowhere. But for me, Hülkenberg's success kind of combines with Haas's success in terms of where they were last year and where they've come to this year. alongside obviously his points, Hulkenberg also finished 11th 7 times, which I think is a record for most finishes in one position outside the points. And when you're looking at it being one place outside the points, in probably what is maybe one of the most Nico Hulkenberg stats of all time, just missing out on something that he's driving towards. Getting kind of those 11th places and getting that amount of points that he did and was able to kind of almost be the best of the rest behind Fernando Alonso and only a point behind Pierre Gasly. His consistency across the season was kind of out of this world, and I think that lends itself to where Haas kind of grew from last year, and I don't think anyone was expecting them to be quite as good. And if Audi can deliver or Sauber can deliver a podium for Nico Hulkenberg in 2025,
we will love them for eternity. Yeah. Looking at the society and what they said, they actually did mostly agree with us, Will, in that Colin Pinto, he got 45% of the votes as the biggest surprise driver. Second wasn't actually Nico Hulkenberg, but it was Pierre Gasly, where I think I can see where that comes from, because I think I only didn't put Gasly because it was they really only came into their own in the last stage of the season. And I do also think, a bit like Nico Hulkenberg, that was in conjunction with Alpine getting better as in terms of their car compared to where they were at the start of the season. Hulkenberg was in third with 20% of the votes, and then Tsunoda as the fourth surprise driver. Was there anything surprising about Tsunoda? I feel like he kind of passed under the radar a little bit.
I think,
at least for me, anyway.
Well, I think for me it was him passing under the radar. But when you actually go and look at kind of his performances, especially with quali as well, you realise that he had a fairly consistently good season. And I think a lot of kind of the lower end of the grid were struggling for those points a lot more, because you reasonably had eight drivers that were kind of taking up those top eight, at least on a normal day, and there were really only 9th and 10th available. But I mean, Tsunoda's performances, I think perhaps into the kind of middle to later part of the season, he did struggle a bit more. But you look, we had a 7th, a few 7th and 8th place. And yeah, it just, when Tsunoda was able to perform, he tended to do quite well, and especially when you compare him to his teammates, Daniel Ricciardo, who we'll probably come on to in a second, and then also Liam Lawson into the back end of the season. Lawson wasn't really able to perform to the level of Tsunoda, and I think it was a quietly confident season from Tsunoda, and I think it's one where he really couldn't have done more to kind of stake his claim if he is going for that second Red Bull seat.
That is a very good point. If you do look to the driver that sits behind Pierre Gasly and Nico Hulkenberg, it is Yuki Tsunoda, and so I think I do kind of I do kind of get that opinion where you don't realize actually how, maybe that's why I didn't pick him, because he was so much of a surprise driver that I didn't even realize that he did as well as he had done. And perhaps a bit inconsistent at times, but yes, he certainly outperformed both teammates that he was up against, I think, Liam Lawson and Daniel Ricciardo. We'll move it on to our next category, the best individual race. So the best driver performance that we've seen in a single race rather than across the whole season for 2024. Katch, who did you go with for the best individual race, and at what race was this?
It has to be Verstappen at Brazil, surely. Like, he qualified
Agreed, yes.
Basically at the back, coming through to win the race. It reminded me of the Hamilton Brazil race where he came through the grid and came through the pack. You have to give it to Max. Like, that was incredible. The overtakes that he did as well, some of them were just up there for like overtake of the season as well. It wasn't just all boring DRS overtakes. So yeah, I have to give it to Max, sadly.
No, I think Max, like that performance at Brazil will probably go down as like a all-time level. Like we'll talk about it in kind of 10 years thing. So I don't think you can really overlook it. But just for the sake of, I guess, a bit of variety, I think there was actually another performance at Brazil that I'd put up there, and that would be Esteban Ocon, because I think he was in a very similar situation in terms of the race he was having as Max was, maybe not coming through the field as much, but kind of on the same tyre strategy, and did get perhaps a little, like, I guess, made the right decisions when that really heavy rain came. And I think it is worth remembering that there was a point, and it wasn't very long, but there was about a 10-lap point where Ocon was leading, and he was somewhat gapping Verstappen. And then obviously that gap came down because of the kind of red flags and safety cars that we had. But when you look at that, you do think that maybe on another day, like this, obviously on another day, you do kind of think Verstappen ends up winning that. But it might be a little more difficult than it looks, and that is because I think Esteban Ocon had a really good race that weekend. And I think it is one that is worth remembering, and it is almost a bit unfortunate that it is overshadowed by what is ultimately probably an all-timer performance from Verstappen.
Yeah, I think I could agree with you and extend that to really both of the Alpine drivers on that Brazil day. Obviously, it was an incredible race for both of them, a double podium for Alpine, which is ultimately why they were able to get sixth in the constructors. But yeah, I think Verstappen, in his performance in Brazil, you can't overlook. If we had a category of best start, I would also go with Brazil in this race for Verstappen. It was absolutely insane. It would be a good start in the dry, let alone in wet conditions. It was honestly, when I saw it on the race replay, I was left jaw drops. It was incredible. But yeah, just the way that he was able to win from 17th on the grid and battle from in the tough conditions as well, really showing his experience. It was absolutely incredible. We'll go to biggest underperformer now, and I feel like unfortunately this might be a quick category to do, especially if we look to the votes that were put in by our society, where it was a landslide victory for Sergio Perez. The only landslide victory, unfortunately, that he is able to get this season. 82% of the votes said that he was the biggest underperformer. And I think I don't want to talk about this too much because we have talked quite a bit about Perez this season, but it is for good reason, because he's really has not found his mojo at all at any stage. Maybe Baku, you could say, as he does love that track, but unfortunately he was involved in the collision with the Ferrari at the end, which meant that he wasn't able to get that podium. And yeah, it just did not happen for him, did it?
No, the amount of kind of Perez stats you've seen over the past, it's
not good.
It's unbelievable. I'll add one. I'll stick with one. But if Sergio Perez hadn't driven after, I think it's China, Red Bull would have still come third in the Constructors' Championship.
Really?
Yeah.
And
and that's even if you account for the points that Mercedes end up gaining, because like there isn't a Perez above them.
Oh crazy.
Nah.
And I think it's just like you look to all of the. I think if we look to all of the top eight, I think you did have a few of them. I think probably, for me, Piastri and ultimately Lewis Hamilton as well, who had underwhelming seasons. But I think Perez is the only one out of that top eight where you can genuinely say he has had an awful season. Outside of past the first 5 races when Red Bull clearly had the best car, it was really only Baku where he was anywhere in terms of being able to compete, not even just for a win, compete for a podium. And it's
where he should be ultimately, just in the top 6. Yes,
I think even if we put Sergio Perez's performances, let's say, in a Haas car, it was still an underwhelming season for a lower team. Just his performances, it was shocking, to be honest. I've gone on and on about how disappointing Sergio Perez has been, and the fact he hasn't been announced as not being in that Red Bull seat yet is crazy. I do want to chuck another person into the mix that actually wasn't on the shortlist, but I feel like it's someone we talk about, or we have talked about in previous seasons quite a lot, and that is Lance Stroll.
Yeah, I was waiting to bring up Lance Stroll.
Was Lance Stroll this season? In a similar vein to Will Sergio Perez stat, if Fernando Alonso didn't race. Oh, was it after China as well?
No, I had this stat and I wanted to bring it up as being the first stat that I'd brought to the table, but no.
Do you want to say it then? Sure, you say it.
So yeah. Okay, thank you. Because Katch, you are usually the stats person, and so I
claiming my job.
It would be with the bringing out the Twitter stats. But yes, I did see this one as well, which I know Katch is about to say. So Alonso, with the amount of points that he scored, he could have hung up his helmet after 4 races this season, after round 4, and he would have finished on the same points that Lance Stroll did for the entire 24 races of this season, which I think is a ridiculous stat. And I think, to be fair, when I did see this, I think it is a little bit biased because the Aston Martins, I think, did start off better this season, and then they just dropped off for the rest of it. But you still can't overlook it. Like 18 races that Lance Stroll would have had to make up that points gap on his teammate, and he was only just able to do it. And yeah, I think he should have deserved to be on that short list ultimately. But yeah,
I didn't think he underperformed. I think Stroll performed exactly at the level that I was
expecting him to.
That's a violation.
That's incredible.
I'm looking at the kind of results now. He didn't score a point after Belgium. So from Belgium onwards, he scored 0 points. And
that's the whole second half of the season.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out every other driver scored a point except for Valtteri Bottas, who didn't score a point at all.
Oh
no, but then he's in a Sauber, so we're gonna let that slide.
Yeah, exactly. So Stroll was statistically the joint worst driver after the end of the season.
I think So I think Stroll is definitely a shout to be on there, but I think Perez only takes it because he's in a Red Bull, and so to have those performances, he has to seriously underperform. So I think I think Perez would have been worse, even though you can't get much worse than Lance Stroll, but if he was in Aston Martin, then he would have been worse than Lance Stroll, perhaps. At least if he stuck to the pace, or the way he adapted to the car and the way that he did for the Red Bulls. And I think as well, just Logan Sargent obviously isn't on this list, and I don't think he maybe deserves to be on this list because a bit like what you were saying with Lance Stroll, you kind of expected him to be there. But I think just the fact that Logan Sargent was ditched halfway through the season and Perez wasn't, we have to talk about Red Bull for keeping him there. What were they doing? I think Logan Sargent, as we mentioned, was ditched for Colapinto just after halfway through the season, and he wasn't performing that well, not getting many points. But then Perez, I think, in my opinion, was doing far worse. And Red Bull actually had something to compete for, which was the constructors' title. You've got to throw questions into the mix, surely.
Yeah, I'm also gonna. I guess. Yeah. The fact Perez was he was basically replaced at Belgium, and then obviously they walked back on their decision, says a lot about in terms of his performance. I think Sargent as well. I could have put Sargent on the list. I tried to limit it to drivers that had completed the full season, and I think, again, maybe doing a little bit of the defense of Logan Sargent, I think he was a driver, and I've said this for a long time, that operated based on confidence. And I think with what you saw happen in Australia when Albon kind of bins it in the wall and takes Logan Sargent's car, I don't think it can be much more of you can't really find much more of a confidence destroyer than that. Outside of the drivers we've mentioned, some of the other nominations. Actually, I completely contradicted myself about drivers that have completed the season.
Second place for Daniel Ricciardo. So Perez obviously got 82% of the votes. Ricciardo was second with 9% of the votes from the society, which I think is true. I did agree with the fact of him getting removed from the RB seat when he did, maybe even earlier. I think actually I did read into this, and Helmut Marko actually wanted it to be a lot earlier. He wanted Ricciardo to be ditched after Spain, which is so much earlier than what he was eventually moved for after, I think it was Singapore, and in place of obviously Liam Lawson. But I think Christian Horner, having a like to Daniel Ricciardo, tried to keep him in as much as possible. But yes, ultimately he should have been ditched. Not in the manner that I thought he was with Singapore, obviously not announcing it, but certainly it was the right decision to remove him from that seat. Third place with 5% of the votes was Alex Albon, which I do think is true, because I would say this for Alex Albon, but only because he has been so good in that Williams car, and he did really seem to drop off in the last stages of that season. And obviously Hamilton, he did have some very bad performances this season. Has some very good ones as well. Come the end stage of the season, such as in Abu Dhabi, and also for the Mercedes 1-2 as well. I think it was in Qatar. And then also in Silverstone as well. But yes, there were certainly some bad races for him this season.
Yeah, I think I put Lewis on there just because I think his qualifying in particular is the reason that I put him on there, in that it just never really looked like he was ever going to compete for even the top four at races, and you were looking towards his teammate Russell, who was able to kind of be up there. And I think it's fair to say that qualifying potentially cost him a bunch of points. And I think even potentially a win in Vegas. I think obviously Mercedes ended up getting the 1-2 there. But had Hamilton started closer to Russell, and obviously he came from, I think it was P10 to P2 in the end. Had they started closer together, is that a win for Lewis Hamilton? We'll never know, because his kind of qualifyings weren't up to scratch. But I mean, you looked earlier in the season, and there were definitely performances that were much more kind of akin to the Hamilton of old. And I think that's why I still have the optimism that when he goes to Ferrari next year, he'll be able to perform on a level that most people expect him to.
Yeah, and I suppose it was always going to be difficult for him trying to perform against the Mr. Saturday and George Russell, with where qualifying is usually his is what he's known for, I suppose. But yeah, certainly something, I think, a bit of form or a bit of aspect of his driving that Hamilton's going to want to improve on and turn around for him going to Ferrari next year. We'll move on to our penultimate category, which is funniest moments, where I honestly did not know what to put for this. I had to really dig deep in what was in the different races that we've had this season to have a look. Will, what have you gone for your funniest moment? Is it presumably one of your categories that, or one of the categories that went out to the society?
Yes, it is. I probably would go for the Verstappen-Russell beef, because I think it just sums up. I guess a little bit of probably hypocrisy from both drivers. I do think that Verstappen complaining about driving standards is a bit on the nose. I also think him saying like Russell was snitching on him to the stewards is like, have you not heard the driver radios throughout all of F1 history? It's basically just snitching on everyone else. It's like, that driver exceeded track limits, he's just turned in on me. Like, he's just dived up the inside. It's just consistent snitching when you actually think about it. And it was very much these two drivers are just having a disagreement, and it was just quite funny the ways in which they were talking about each other. I just can't, like, 'cause it was just. And it does sum it up a bit. It's got a bit ridiculous by the end. And I think by the time you got to Abu Dhabi, it had died down a bit, because I think they both realised this is getting a bit over the top.
It was very much like primary school beef, I think, when you're both complaining to each other about each other to the teacher. And it was very interesting, as you mentioned, about Verstappen saying not only with his driving standards, and he has certainly got something to say about that, for his driving this season, but also complained to the stewards. And I think even more so this season, because we were complaining come the end, near to the last stage of the season, when there was a lot of internal switch ups with the stewards, where we thought it had gotten a lot to the point where we needed where it was needed that drivers actually reported the incidents to the stewards rather than them investigating it themselves. But I know for a fact that Verstappen, if he could get any sort of advantage by complaining about another driver over the radio and that could convert to points, he would take it within in a heartbeat. So that was maybe interesting words from him, and definitely made an interesting later stage of the season to see that beef from two drivers, which I don't think we really expected. Katch, what was your decision for funniest moment of the 2024 season?
I've also agreed with the beef. I think I don't want to add too much more because it's all been said, but also the fact it was after Verstappen's title was wrapped up. It brought the entertainment. It was all. I would have understood it a bit more if it was earlier in the season for Verstappen, but the fact he was bringing it up and arguing so late on, just made it all very funny. Loved that online Twitter rumors that I saw and all the beef. It was great. So
was this after Verstappen had wrapped up the drivers' championship?
This was after. Yeah.
So
it was the last 2 rounds.
This and also the overtake that he tried, I say overtake, it was more driving into Piastri, the dive bomb in Abu Dhabi. All of this after he's basically completed the Drivers' Championship and also third is pretty much inevitable in the Constructors. So why is he even debating this? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
it was funny. It was great.
It had some entertainment. So in terms of the other categories that we decided, so that did come first in 55%. The Verstappen-Russell beef. 34% did go to Norris's infamous lap ones or turn ones. We won't dwell too much on that for Katch's sake. Verstappen at Hungary as well got to 8%, and the Bottas Abu Dhabi crash where he locked his brakes and went into Magnussen, ending both of their races and times in F1, got 2% of the votes. And I'd also like to mention, I actually found one which I particularly remember, which was not on the nominations list, where in a certain Las Vegas Grand Prix, when Leclerc was told that Sainz would not overtake him, and his response to this was maybe try in Spanish, which is such I just think a great comeback to his race engineer on that front.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Like, some of the radios have been really iconic this season. I think that deserves a category in itself, to be honest, the best iconic radio. But yeah, maybe try it in Spanish is, what maybe a bit too far, Leclerc.
I don't know. I did forget about maybe trying Spanish, because it's when you actually think about it, it's quite difficult to think of funny moments. And I think past the Verstappen-Russell beef, and I'm sorry, Katch, Norris's consistent lap one losing positions did get quite funny after a while. Past those two, it does get a little difficult. But no, I think try it in Spanish will probably be remembered for quite a long
There's
time.
There's an iconic radio messages. Yeah, indeed. And we'll finally move on to our last category that we've gone for, which is the best overtake of the season. Will, we'll start off with you for this one. What have you gone for the best overtake this year?
Well, I should be bowing down to the mighty FIA who have judged Perez's overtake as action of the year when it's not. But no, I've gone for the one I've agreed with the F1 Society. I've gone for Albon at Canada. So going down the back straight, Albon, I think he's overtaking an Alpine and then just thinks, oh, you know what? For the fun of it, I'm just going to dive down the inside of Ricciardo at the same time. And it is a great move. I think it's born of I'm gonna overtake here. I'm gonna crash into something, and it is really cool to kind of see it work, and like him being able to weave from the outside of the Alpine to the inside of Ricciardo. And it's not really a corner where you can normally overtake, especially that late, kind of into the straight. And when you look at it, it's a great move, and it's not really something we've seen like comparably over the past few years, and it's not something I think anyone was expecting out of the Williams.
And we're also failing to mention that this is in the wet when Albon is on intermediate tyres and very much missing the wall of champions, which is impressive in itself, let alone when overtaking two drivers down the back straight. It was definitely an incredible an incredible overtake, and one, as you mentioned, that the society did agree with you. 48% of the votes went to Albon's overtake in Canada. Katch, what was your nomination? What was your nomination for best overtake of the season?
I'm boring and go with the same result. I'm going Alex in Canada.
Oh, okay.
I think it was great. The other example, the other nominations being, well, we ignore Sergio Perez, but being Verstappen's Brazil overtakes, as I mentioned previously, you can't pick one. There are at least 3 or 4 that were just incredible going through the grid. But also, I know it's not best overtake or best moment of the year, but Colapinto's dive bomb on Alex in Singapore was just very funny in itself, and Alex complaining over the radio. It was just such a ballsy move for a driver that is so unestablished in the sport. So I think I'm so glad it's on the nomination list, because you have to respect Colapinto for that.
Yeah, I think so. And the one that we went out to to the society with Verstappen is just in brackets any of them, which is just indication that you really can't choose between them. I again went for one that was not on the society list. I thought I have another honourable mention as well, which is I think Piastri's overtake for the lead in Baku on, I think it's Charles Leclerc, definitely a Ferrari driver. Or maybe Carlos Sainz, but just when he's going from down the back straight and you're going down thinking, okay, he's too far back, and then he lunges for it and somehow still makes the corner. And I think that was just incredible for me to see, with having so much faith in the car and also in the life that he's got left in his tyres. But I actually went for something completely different, and maybe a little bit of recency bias, but I really did like Leclerc's triple overtake in Abu Dhabi.
There was a society member that messaged being like, "Oh, what about Leclerc in Abu Dhabi?" So
yes, I should say that's not me, but it's...
Yeah, I know it's not you.
I think it's good. I think it's round, though it is round the outside though, and I think especially when everyone has kind of bunged themselves up the inside and it's like a trade, it's a lot easier to go round the outside, and I think it's similar to Colapinto's one in terms of like what it's done. It's overtake on lap 1 on multiple cars, but Colapinto is launching that up the inside. And right, to be fair to him, is it a dive bomb? Yes. Is it an uncontrolled dive bomb? Absolutely not. He gets stopped. No, Colapinto, he gets stopped. He turns for the corner. He even leaves, probably not a car's width, but he leaves space on the outside. And I think they're similar, but if I was going to pick a lap 1 dive bomb, it probably would be Colapinto's for me over Charles Leclerc.
Colapinto needs to teach Max Verstappen how to lap 1 dive bomb then, and stay in control of his car. Jesus.
And also, this is still when Colapinto did this, it still is only his 3rd race in F1. And I think if you had any driver kind of launching it like that after their 3rd race, like the confidence on the brakes, it's like almost Daniel Ricciardo-esque. And I think that's just why it was up there for me. I think Leclerc's one is an honourable mention. Piastri's one as well. I think we had a lot of kind of good overtakes. I will even throw in a biased mention of Hamilton's one on Russell, because I think the narrative works there, and especially round the outside, to that extent, was quite a good overtake. But yeah, a lot of good overtakes to kind of talk about for this season.
We certainly did have a lot of good overtakes to choose from, I think, and we were sport for choice in terms of picking for the nominations of the society. As I mentioned, Albon in Canada did get the win on that one with 48% of the votes. Then Verstappen, any of his in Brazil, got 34% of the votes. Colapinto in Singapore with that incredible dive bomb in 15%. And our society very much disagreeing with the FIA in terms of action of the season, with getting 3% of the votes for his overtake in China. But yes, very good. We've done very well there of picking some of our favourite moments and our nominations for our Warwick F1 Show awards for the 2024 season. But thank you very much for everyone tuning in. We shall make sure to have plenty of other episodes coming your way for the off season, like a news episode to update you guys with any recent headlines that have been coming out in the world of F1 as we approach the winter testing for 2025 in a couple of months' time, and also some an episode looking into some specific driver rankings as well, which will be coming your way very, very soon. But until then, thank you very much, Will and Katch, for joining me. I have been your host, Callum, and until next time, goodbye.